who's on board. And then as we get going, we will encourage you to put any questions you have in the chat. And we'll try to follow those as we get going. So just want to thank you for all of you for making the commitment to be part of the Chippewa Valley Rally this year. We have one of our largest contingents ever going, and a lot of thank yous that we're going to want to provide to people. We are finalizing the assignments of the team leaders and teams today. So you should be getting an email from us soon with the visits you're going to be having when you're on a team in Madison next week, as well as the other team members you'll be with. And then a reminder that on Friday at 11, we'll be back together again and we'll do an issues briefing. So we'll be going through the issues at the Chippewa Valley Rally. You all should have received with the email reminder I sent yesterday a link to the issues book that we'll have at the rally, so you can start getting familiar with that. This session and the one on Friday will both be recorded, so you can look at them later, or if for those of you that might miss one or the other, you can take advantage of the recording and get familiar before you head to Madison next week and join us on Wednesday, the 28th. So my name is Scott Rogers. I'm Vice President, Governmental Affairs at the Eau Claire Area Chamber of Commerce. We work together with the Chippewa Falls and Eau Claire chambers Eau Claire and Menominee chambers to put this program together every year. In fact, this is our 30th annual trip to Madison. What we're going to do today is give you some background on the political environment in Madison and how you can be effective in working with lawmakers and other public officials. We started doing this during the year that we did everything online, and it was valuable to people. So we've actually continued it as a pre-event briefing every year. And we're really privileged to have with us two experts in the political environment in Madison because of their experience there over the years. And they're also plugged into both parties, and that's helpful for us as well. I'll introduce them in alphabetical order. We have Bill McCoshen. Bill is a partner with Michael Best Strategies. He has decades of experience in Wisconsin, including the governor's office. He's been a cabinet secretary. He's been a lobbyist. He was managing partner of Madison-based capital consultants for 23 years and has been with Michael Best now for 2 or 3 years. I should have looked it up exactly. He's a native of Superior. He held key positions in Tommy Thompson's administration, including Secretary of Commerce and Chief of Staff. Shawn Pfaff is with us as well. Shawn is president of Pfaff Public Affairs, lobbying and media relations firm. They work closely with a number of organizations in Madison and throughout the state, especially in agriculture. He's originally from a dairy farm in La Crosse County. He also worked with Bill and Capital Consultants for several years, was 3.5 years in his advisor in Governor Doyle's office, deputy campaign manager in his 2006 reelection, also served 3 years in DC as a congressional aide. So Bill and Shawn, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
So we're going to do two primary things. We're going to talk about the political environment in Madison. So some of you who are on the call today have been on the Chippewa Valley Rally several times. Many of you, it's your first time. And so we want to give you a sense of what it's like in Madison with the two parties and the environment. And then we are going to spend a little bit of time talking about, okay, how can you be the most effective when you're dealing with lawmakers? You'll all be doing individual visits, team visits in individual legislative offices next week, and interacting with people at the reception and other places as well. So let's first maybe get both Bill and Shawn's take on what is the general sense of the political environment in Madison this year.
Well, sure, I can start, Bill, if you don't mind. Again, welcome everybody. Shawn Pfaff, proud Blue Gold class of 1994. So always fun to talk to folks from Chippewa Valley, especially Eau Claire. I think what you're seeing right now in Wisconsin is something really unique as you come down here. Many of you have friends and neighbors and do business in Minnesota. Minnesota is a state where one party controls everything. Here in Wisconsin, we truly are unique that you have a governor of one party and a legislature of another party. And that isn't always easy, but sometimes that's what things can really get done. Maybe stuff doesn't get done that you're okay with, and things do get done. And so I think you see now a legislative session, we get the specifics, it's starting to come to the end of it. But overall, this session was not easy, but some big things did get done. The funding for the Milwaukee Brewers to stay here for another nearly 30 years, rewriting the state's alcohol and liquor distribution plan is not easy. You saw um, redistricting maps that we're going to get into as well get done. So things are getting done in the state. However, there still is a lot of big issues that are out there. And both parties definitely have places where they play to the base. But overall, a budget passed, and we still are walking in $7 billion roughly surplus heading into the next budget. So I think the state of the Capitol, Scott, is yes, consternation, but there are some successes that occur. And so I'm excited to talk about those today with you. And thank you for the invite.
Yeah, Bill McCoshen, as Scott pointed out, originally from Superior, like Dave. I am a honorary Blue Gold alumnus. I've got my award on my desk. It's something I take great pride in. I've done a lot of work with Eau Claire, and going back to my days as Commerce when Uniroyal left, and then the last 6-7 years working with the UW Eau Claire Foundation on a variety of key projects for the area. What I like best about Eau Claire is that you guys have a very active and effective economic development team. And that includes the campus, it includes the chamber, it includes all of you who've joined this call who are willing to put in some time and learn a little bit about what's going on in Madison, and then come down here and try and make a difference. That is unique in Wisconsin. You don't see every community doing it the way you guys do it. And when the chips are on the line, Eau Claire comes together in the region to do the right thing. And that right thing isn't Republican, nor is it Democrat. It's the right thing for the community. And we're facing with that situation right now with the closure of the local hospitals. So as we walk through this today, we're going to talk a little bit about the politics in Madison, which is, Shawn's right. There actually was a lot of big agreements between the Democratic governor and the Republican majorities. Those don't get spoken of much, but they are significant and historic. But that legislative landscape is about to change based on Governor Evers signing Act 94 this week. There's little doubt that Democrats will pick up seats in both houses, probably a significant number of seats in the assembly, and that changes the dynamic of how the building works. You got a former lawmaker on this call, you got a former candidate on this call, at least one, and they understand that, the closer the majorities are, the more likely it is you're going to find compromise. So it isn't all bad, but the legislature is going to change, and there are a couple seats in Eau Claire that are impacted by this specifically that we'll talk about as we get there. But as we move forward, we're going to talk about how to deal with what to do when you come to Madison. And I'll start before Scott even asks the question. The most effective thing you can do when you come to Madison is say thank you. It doesn't happen often. People don't realize how important those two words are down here. But let me just give you a list of some things that everyone can be grateful for. Science Hall. That took 8 years to get to this point. It is the largest public works project in the state budget ever in history. Heritage Hall. Nobody expected that to happen. Your local lawmakers made that happen at the last minute. It was a big deal. It is a big deal. The shared revenue agreement between the legislature and the governor is historic. And it may not mean the same thing for Eau Claire County and Eau Claire as it does in some other communities, but it is the largest increase in state support to localities in history. That's a big deal. The tech hub, the governor's going to sign that bill today. It passed with only one dissenting vote through the legislature. It's going to sign it at 12:45. I'll be over there. It's a $7.5 million grant to BioForward. BioForward has an operation now on UW Eau Claire campus. So you're going to have a role in that. And the chancellor and his team and I have been working on ways to expand what we're doing on the medical side moving forward. And then lastly, the relief package, which is going to make it to the governor's desk, the $15 million, I would call that a placeholder. It's not going to solve, it's not even going to come close to solving the problems in Eau Claire caused by the closures, but it's some money set aside to deal with some things while they're looking for people to come in behind HSHS and Prevea and take over that market share. And your chamber president, Dave Miner's been working his tail off. I talk to him almost every day on that topic. So my advice to you is when you come here, rather than starting with a list of what you want next, I would say thank you for the things that you've already gotten. And then don't be bashful about saying, we'll be back. We got a big problem. It's not just an Eau Claire problem. It's ultimately going to be a statewide problem, and it needs to be fixed. So that'd be my advice on that.
Yeah, and let's come back to both of those topics in a minute. One of the things I might ask about is just the fact that this is not the budget year. So the cycle in Wisconsin is the odd numbered years right after an election. We have our 2-year budget. That's when most things happen. We're going to be there next week. If I understand the calendar right, the Assembly may have already adjourned by the time we come back. The Senate may meet again. So how is it different when we show up at the Chippewa Valley Rally in a non-budget year? I will answer one of the things that, and Bill, I think perhaps has seen our issues this year heavily on thank yous for a lot of the things that he just mentioned, and also the housing bill and some other things. So, but how is the atmosphere different, and how effective can we be when they're either on their way out or have already adjourned?
Well, I think, Scott, it's important to, as Bill said, agree with thank you. I also worked along with Bill and Chancellor Jim and Jake Rossi and others on that Eau Claire Project Foundation. That was just a real pride and joy. And that Heritage Hall, the way that came together, I think is because of the work that groups like you do, the Chippewa Valley. And yes, it's not a budget year. And there's no doubt that the Chippewa Valley plays a huge role in the budget, joint finance hearings being held up in that part of the state. Key lawmakers sit on joint finance committees. Key spots in the budget are huge. But in this off year, if you will, by you folks coming down and continually bringing your message to Eau Claire, from Eau Claire and Chippewa Valley to the Capitol is important. Every year it's important that staffers and lawmakers see you. Those scarves are off the charts. People love those, to see you in the hallways with those. It's important to be down here every year. And, not every year, you're not always down here just asking for something. You're thinking, of course, you want to get things in return, but to have the repetition, to be here, good to see you again. Making the trip is very important to do that, because that allows law offices to say, are those Chippewa Valley folks here yet? Or what are they thinking about up there? I mean, I know they're coming here in a few weeks, that kind of stuff. So I guess my message is, by coming down every year, not every other year, you're staying in front, you're staying top of mind, and you're in front of people because you're laying the groundwork for the next ask. And faces are going to change and new people are going to be here. But one thing is constant: the Chippewa Valley Rally continues to roll. Next year will be the 31st year. And you guys are post-partisan. You're not stuck in the weeds of one side or the other. And that really works. And as I said at the top of my comments, state where you have a governor of one party and a legislature of another party, to have that kind of post-partisan, nonpartisan briefing and issue advocacy is so crucial, especially when you're not down here asking for really, really big things. Now, I get the hospital's a huge deal, but you get my point in the context of the budget. So thank you for taking time to come down here. You still will make an impact, very much so.
Yeah, I agree with Shawn. He and I have worked together for the last 18 years in some way, shape, or form. So I think it's been a pretty effective team for the Chippewa Valley, and pretty rare that we disagree on things. The legislature, Scott, being gone, the assembly is going to be done tomorrow night, come hell or high water. They will be done. The Senate is still going to meet one more day in March. I think it's the 12th. They haven't set that date yet, but that's the most likely. So it is, you'll still find lawmakers here next week. On the assembly side, you'll get probably a few more staffers, but that's the map that's going to be the most competitive in November, is the assembly map. And we'll get into some of the specifics for why that is. So lawmakers are going to be really tuned in to what you're saying, maybe more so than they had to be in the past, right? I mean, if you had a safe seat, pretty easy to help you if they had the time, or not help you if they didn't have the time. Now I think everybody's going to want to be on the team. And frankly, again, the Eau Claire delegation has always been that way. We've never had a big partisan difference. Other than on this relief package, Scott raised that in our pre-call. There's a little bit of dust up between the Republicans and Democrats because it wasn't a bipartisan effort, and that's too bad. That is sort of out of character for the Eau Claire area. But hopefully the governor will be able to bring that all back together when he signs it, and anything beyond that, which will be significantly bigger, will have to be bipartisan.
Well, let's come back to that as long as you brought it up. And Bill, we might start with you just on this. You mentioned that you were Secretary of Commerce when UNRWA closed, and that was a big deal for our community. Now we have hospitals and clinics that are closing. Are there any lessons from there, and how is this different? And then let's talk about the package that's being worked on.
Yeah, I would say you're more prepared now for calamity or catastrophe. I mean, the community came together quickly on the Royal thing. Don't misunderstand that. But you guys have kept that infrastructure going literally for 30 years. I mean, you have a group of community leaders, business leaders, university folks who work together well, who have a plan. They know how to execute that plan, and they can adjust when there's a catastrophe. And I mean, truthfully, what happened in Eau Claire with those hospitals, it is a catastrophe. There's no other way to look at that. From an economic development standpoint, if you're a business looking at Eau Claire, you're saying, I'm not sure I want to locate there now because I don't know if there's going to be access to the hospital services that my employees will need, right? So there's other downstream problems with what happened aside from the people who live in Eau Claire and need access to those services today. It sends a very bad message, and it has to get fixed. And I think you guys have the team, Scott, to come up with the plan that will include some kind of legislation at some point, and it'll have to be bipartisan. And hopefully there'll be a knight in shining armor that comes in and takes some of those assets and keeps them going.
Yeah, you also, just to you and Dave and others up there, you guys have had the communication and flow over the years of exit issues and having lawmakers having their tasks and their job duties more or less to come meet with you guys on issues like this. Now, this is a massive issue and this is a huge issue. The repetitive nature of the exit issues, having lawmakers and that communication. So it isn't the first time we heard from the chamber. Geez, we never hear from them. We never hear from the business community. Now they need something and all things are going to heck in a handbasket. No, you guys are continually in front of your lawmakers. Bill's right. This process may not be the easiest, but in the end, I think that the governor has been up there a lot. He understands that community well. Your lawmakers are up there. We have this issue of redistricting where people's districts are going to get a little more competitive, a little tighter. So people are going to have a little more rabbit ears. They're going to want to deliver. There's no doubt we're Wisconsin, guys. Politics is kind of who we are in this state. I don't think there's gone a day where we haven't been on the front page of some news story in the last 10 years about Wisconsin politics being a little too political at times. But I think this is an issue where you as the chamber and business leaders have the infrastructure in place. Communication lines are still open, and that will help you greatly as you work through this big issue.
So one of the things we talked about was, Bill, so this is Wednesday that we're recording this. And so it's being recorded. Most people are on live, but some people are going to be watching it later. So if somebody's watching this on Friday or Monday or Tuesday, just before the rally, they may have more current information as to how all this turns out. But Shawn, there's the bill to take the $15 million that was originally appropriated in the 2021 budget for HSHS for mental health beds. And it turns out that money was never used. And now there's been the proposal that Bill mentioned to take that $15 million, take it out of the state building fund, put it in the general fund, make it available DHS with approval of joint finance to use it for emergency services and to fill at least some of the gap that's happening here. Shawn, some of the folks on the Democratic side have raised some questions about it. The vote in the Senate was partly party line. Probably is not fair to ask prognosis because we'll find out how this turns out when it's on the assembly floor on Thursday. But what's your take on it, and can we expect? What do you think the governor will do with it?
Well, I think obviously the governor is aware of the situation. I think he knows. I don't dare speak for him, but I think he knows being headlines, being up there, what's happening, obviously the work that you're doing, communication with your lawmakers. I think the issue is that maybe some folks wanted to see that package be a little bit broader. Could we bring more people in, maybe a little more bipartisan? But the one bill that deals with the 15 million, as I understand it, did pass an Assembly Health Committee by a unanimous vote. And in a Capitol where we deal with governor of one party, a legislature of another party, you always can tell if your bill's going anywhere if all of a sudden it comes out of committee on a party line vote. If it passes unanimously, it's usually a pretty good sign. So that's maybe the more narrow package, Scott, if you will. But in terms of the Senate and the dust up yesterday, I don't know enough. I don't want to say something that I shouldn't. I do think that the governor's office is closely in contact with makers to track where this ends up in the end. I can't guarantee where he'll be on the bill that passed the Senate yesterday. But I do think there's hopefully some consensus that can be found on that other bill that I discussed.
Yep. What happens in divided government, at least the last few years, is Republicans tend to send the governor two bills dealing with the same issue, the policies in one bill and the monies in the other. That eliminates his line item of veto ability. So if he doesn't like the policy part of this, he could veto it and still sign the 15 million. What happens to it, sort of is debatable at that point in time. But the governor's got some other tools. Like if Dave's local group, and I'm part of that, comes up with a grand package, by May, could the governor call the legislature back into special session to deal with it? Absolutely, he could. Could they wait until after the elections and do a lame duck session? Absolutely, they could. There's nothing that prohibits them from coming back after they leave, other than the urgency, right? So there's clear urgency in Eau Claire, and I think it's going to end up in more communities than just Eau Claire. So the question is, what's the timing? When does it have to be dealt with? When's the best time? If you have a suitor, someone coming in from an economic development standpoint to take over those assets, that might be the time. Remember, the legislature came back in for Foxconn, for example, specifically for that. So if it's an economic development play, that's a possibility. So I wouldn't think that just because the assembly leaves tomorrow night at 10 o'clock that this is done. There's nothing that can be done until January of 25. That's not accurate. The legislature could call themselves back, or the governor could call them back if there's a grand bargain. It doesn't make any sense for him to call them back on a deal they're not part of. This is going to sound partisan. It's just a fact. He's 0 for 14 on special sessions. So every time he calls one, they do nothing. That's not a strategy I would recommend to him or his people. I would work this out. If there's a deal to be had with a suitor or something that can stabilize the current providers.
This is an issue that, yes, you're dealing with it front and center, but you may be the canary in the coal mine, or whatever the saying is. I mean, this might be an issue if Wisconsin's going to continue to deal with workforce issues and community reinvestment and economic development, making all parts of the state be part of Wisconsin's future. These are issues that are going to come forefront. And I have the confidence that the Chippewa Valley and its collaboration and its ability with the chambers, working with the university and the business community, nonprofits, et cetera, you guys know how to put this thing together. You're not in silos up there. That's the greatest thing about working with you, big picture, Scott. I worked with Chancellor Jim and others for years, is you'd get these phone calls from the chancellor. And he said, I was just on the phone with so-and-so who runs X, Y, and Z in Eau Claire. I mean, those are just spectacular things to have everybody that's kind of running different parts of your economy and your community able to pick up and get people on a conference call. And so I feel confident that the roadmap is there. And I think Bill's right. Other people are going to be paying attention to this stuff because this is something that could happen in another community pretty quickly. And healthcare and the support services around that are so crucial to people's personal lives, but also employers and things like that. So we got to get this right. But I think the communication and the collaboration over the years really will do you well as you continue to work on this.
So I think you both brought up the next question I was going to ask, and that is, how is the rest of the state doing what has happened here with our healthcare? institutions, and what is the next steps on that? And are we being looked as a canary in a coal mine? And are we going to be able to look at maybe some more comprehensive consideration statewide of what are the issues in healthcare, and is somebody else going to be next after us?
I want to just take a side approach on this, a kind of big picture. I'll let Bill, I don't put you in a spot. I'll let you get in the weeds in the healthcare stuff. But I just think this kind of frames, Scott, where we're going big picture in this state. Right now, the Republicans really want to put a tax cut in front of the governor. It's the fourth time they're going to send him a tax cut. And they've kind of whittled down the middle rates, et cetera. Evers and legislative Democrats have been consistently saying no to that. Now, there may be a child care tax credit that actually will get signed where it increases from 10,000 to 20,000. What am I trying to say is that the Republicans are focusing on tax cuts. Evers wants child care and some sort of social services supports, things like that. And the governor, Tony, has said over and over, send me some child care things. Let's focus on these wraparound services that can make communities be even better. And you see a lot of chambers of commerce, especially from smaller towns around northern Wisconsin, say we need child care dollars, especially since that ARPA money or federal money is gone. So you're going to have this debate about tax cuts, what size they are, who do they hit, and how do you then invest in things like child care or health care. And we may be, classic Wisconsin where we kick this thing down the road a little bit till the next election, but this is not going to go away. I mean, the $7 billion surplus, Evers has been consistent. Give me something from child care. The Republicans have said tax cut. This healthcare component of that might be an off ramp of this as well, where there's this kind of this combination of kind of putting all this stuff together. And I think the two sides still, as frustrating it can be, they still somehow communicate with each other. And this could be part of something like that, especially if it pops up around the state.
Yeah, I would just add to that, Scott, that hospitals across the state are watching this.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have similar payer mixes where it's 2/3 MA, 1/3 private. That's tough to sustain over a long period of time with MA reimbursement rates. And that's one of the things the local committee's looking at to, potentially recommend to the legislature to address either sooner than later or next session. The point about the surplus, I think the governor signs the child care tax credit. I think he vetoes the rest of them, which will preserve probably about $2.5 billion in the surplus. That means there's money to be spent later. And later could mean a lame duck session. Later could mean right away in January next year. The traditional process would have all monies being spent in the budget, which is next June. But in a crisis situation, there are plenty of ways around that legislatively.
So since you mentioned next January, and we've made several references to redistricting, bringing people up to speed, and I'm guessing most people on board have been following the news, but in case you haven't, the governor signed a bill this week to implement the maps he proposed to the legislature, because the legislature passed that. So what does this mean? Not only for control of the legislature next year, but even for this next week when we're in Madison, how is that coloring how legislators and people in government are approaching things now?
Some people you're going to meet with may not be here in January of 25. That's the reality of it. So historically, this is the first time since 1970 that the legislature and the governor agreed on a set of maps. And I mean by split parties. The Senate was controlled by Republicans in 1970. It was Democratic governor, Democratic assembly. The court sort of forced them to work together. They did it. The only other time we've had legislatively passed and gubernatorial signed maps were one-party control. So this is the second time in 54 years that this has happened. The legislative Republicans decided based on the Supreme Court case. And by the way, Scott and Dave have a slide deck that's pretty easy to understand that our team at Michael Best Strategies put together, that they're welcome to share with you guys. And it sort of walks through it pictorially, what seats are now more competitive. But the analysis comes back with Democrats will significantly shrink the GOP majority in the assembly. I won't make formal predictions until this September's exit issues, but the Republicans could lose 8 to 12 seats in the assembly pretty easily. I think they lose 2 in the Senate. The 26 cycle is much harder for Republicans. But there are a couple things to know about your area. Like Jesse James and Jeff Smith are now in the same seat. They can both continue to represent the 23rd in Jesse's case or the 31st in Jeff's case until 2026. And then they'll have to make a choice. Jesse either has to move to run again in the 23rd, or he's got to run against Jeff in the 31st. He is going to run against Jeff in the 31st. I had dinner with him last week. That's a done deal. So there will be a competitive race for the 31st. The 23rd, now vacant, is where Romaine Quinn now lives. Rice Lake was cut out of the 25th, and it's now in the 23rd. Quinn has to make a decision. Does he run for the 23rd, where he lives, although he's at the northernmost point, or does he move to Spooner and run for the 25th? That decision hasn't been made. But those are kind of calculations that senators in particular have a little bit of time to make. They may be, quote, lame ducks in the seat they represent, and there's about 5 of them that no longer live in the seat that they represent. But my guess is, and Howard Markline would be one of those, the chairman, co-chair of the Joint Finance Committee. That seat on the governor's maps, the 17th, is pretty blue. I'm here to tell you candidates matter. Howard will move into the 17th from Spring Green, and he'll win it. I can predict that today. Nobody raises more money or works harder than him. So the top of the ticket numbers won't matter. Candidates do matter. So I think the Republicans probably lose 2 in the Senate this time, but they could lose the majority in 26. Regardless, the assembly is going to shrink. It's going to give Democrats and the governor a little more leverage moving forward. And then all the marbles will be on the 2025 Supreme Court race. The conservatives will try and flip the majority back their direction. Liberals will try and hold it. That's where the fight will be. So you're going to see intense politics, not just through November. You're going to see it through next April, like way intense.
Scott, we all come from somewhere. You had said in my resume that I worked for Governor Jim Doyle. Very proud of that. 2-term Democratic governor. Obviously, lobby both sides of the aisle. Very proud of those relationships. I'm just going to put a slight partisan hat on for just a second. I think Democrats are ecstatic that they actually have a chance to be competitive in the state in legislative races. For 12 years, Democrats would try to get candidates to run for office, and you'd ask them if they can win. Well, the maps are gerrymandered, so I don't know if I can win, but, give me some money or whatever. So the point is now there's 46 seats in the assembly that are lean Republican, 45 that lean Democratic. The rest are up for grabs. And that is something that has made national news, so much so that, you've seen it on the National New York Times, Washington Post, all this stuff, have picked up those stories. So I think you see, coming from that world, a Democratic governor got a Republican-dominated legislature to sign his maps. The other thing that's important in this, and this was a little consternation over the last 10 days or so, because people are always concerned about this, and I understand there's a little bit of trust verify, Bill, to quote your favorite president, Ronald Reagan, that was it really real that the Republicans were going to pass the Democratic governor's maps, or was there some sort of shenanigans? Now, I don't know all the behind-the-scenes stuff, but anyway, Evers signs the maps this past Monday. As Bill said, first time in 50 years, one party passes it, another party governor signs it. Tony, when he signed that, I think brings some certainty to it, because it doesn't go to the Supreme Court, where there can be potential appeals and things like that. Oh, did Protasevich get on because of this? The politics isn't clean. Here it's clean, all the marbles, let's run. There's a lawmaker on this call that I know well who recruited candidates for years for the legislature. The key part of this is when nomination papers are circulated on April 15th in these new maps, what does it come back at 5 o'clock on June 1st? Who are these candidates? I think Democrats are seeing their phones ring off the hook. The candidates want to run. And they want to run for office because they feel like they've got a real shot here to maybe get involved in the process. Now, that's coming from a guy from a little bit partisan side, and I'm not intended to be partisan at all, but I just think that's where things are at from that world, Scott. Bill may have another perspective, but I just think there's some energy that hasn't been out there in 10 or 12 years. I think the Chippewa Valley, it's going to get a little tighter up there because it's a swing area, but still there's going to be some great races up there, and votes are going to matter. And so that's the exciting thing about this is, I think, moving forward.
Yeah, the other two seats that are noteworthy to you guys, the Eau Claire seat that Jody Emerson has, she and Karen Hurd are now in the same seat. And
Right.
what was a 64% Democratic seat is now about a 54% Democratic seat. I expect Karen Hurd to run against Jody Emerson. So that'll be a very competitive seat for the city of Eau Claire. One a little bit to the north and east of you guys, Rob Summerfield and Jimmy Boy Edming are in the same seat. My guess is Rob Summerfield runs for that and Jimmy Boy retires, but I don't know that that's been fully worked out. So there are other races that will be a heck of a lot more competitive than you're used to in your area.
Yeah, no, it's Bill. I was in a meeting yesterday with Warren Petrick. You know Warren well, and this group certainly knows Warren well, and he served with distinguished honor for 14 years up there. He now represents EW Eau Claire campus. I mean, he had a pretty dominant rural district for a while, and now Warren's got campus. So this stuff is interesting where things will go. So it'll be interesting where things end up.
One of the questions I might ask about that is, how predictive are those partisan and the candidates do matter. For instance, if I looked at the analysis Bill sent, and we're getting that out to everybody here, Jeff Smith is in a lean Republican district now, and he's won it twice. So how predictive are those partisan leans on those?
I wouldn't go strictly by the top of the ticket. Brian Westrate put something in the chat that it was the Supreme Court, the new majority, that decided in December that these were unconstitutional. It had to do with contiguity within the districts. But then the formula that they prescribed for the remedy, I should say, included top of the ticket performance or partisan balance. That's never happened in the history of our state before. That's a brand new remedy that the Republicans frankly gave away when they passed the governor's maps. I don't think they can go back to a new Supreme Court if they take it in 2025 and say, oh, can we undo that? Because they've accepted it at this point in time. Maybe there's a legal theory, but I think they probably gave away some runway on the legal side to try and minimize their risk of a worse map happening. So we're going to have these maps, I think, till the next decennial census. And it really comes down to candidates. To your question about predictiveness, a guy like Todd Novak, if you look at the 51st, just outside of Madison, Dodge County, Iowa County, I'm telling you, Todd Novak's going to win that seat. It doesn't matter if it's 58% Democrat or 60% Democrat. Todd Novak is going to win that seat. So candidates matter. And this, Jeff Smith did very well in what was, quote, a lean Republican district. Maybe the candidates weren't as good on the Republican side. I don't know. But there'll be surprises too. There will be incumbents who were not expected to lose who lose because they either didn't raise the money or didn't put in the effort needed in a new seat. So
the other thing, other thing too, besides to get out of the partisanship, but a little bit, Scott, is we see this. Bill has an array of clients, and so do I. A lot of the things besides partisan differences are the geographic differences: urban, rural, suburban, urban. So to have, go back to why we're here, Scott, to have a region of the state all the way from, western Dunn County, the middle of Chippewa County to, south almost to Black River Falls come together as a region of the state. That's important because a lot of these issues fall into this geographic divide as well. And that's kind of where we are in this country. Democrats tend to live in cities. And that's why these redistricting maps are so interesting because, Democrats, are on top of each other figuratively in Madison, and in the rural areas of the state are very, very Republican. So how do you draw a map that kind of reflects the partisan differences as well as the geographic divides in this state? So that's what will be so fascinating about what type of candidates run. Who will they be? So, for example, I know somebody who's in the state Senate, his district right now, has had Prairie du Chien as part of the Western Wisconsin district since, I think, 1920. The lawmaker who's on here used to hold the seat. She may disagree with me, but now Crawford County is in a district with Grant County. And so you're seeing some of these communities have been together for a long time, no longer together, but others that haven't been together are now together. I think in Jeff's new seat, Bill, if I'm correct, parts of Menominee are now with Eau Claire, right? So you haven't seen that for years happen. So it's an interesting kind of how these different communities work together. So superseding all of that is having groups like Chippewa Valley, who has no problem crossing county lines, jurisdiction lines, no territory, no we're better than you. And if Rice Lake gets something, that's bad for Eau Claire, or if Menominee gets something, that's bad for Chippewa. You've never done that. My claim to fame, Bill talked about Uniroyal. I came to Eau Claire as a straight-haired, curly-teeth kid from a farm in western Wisconsin in the fall of '89. And Uniroyal closed shortly thereafter, and Hutchinson came in, and you started to see that collaboration happen between the communities. So you guys have been doing this a long time, and that supersedes redistricting maps and partisan maps and all that stuff.
Well, I'll remind our people on the call that if you do have any questions for our panel, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll ask them. We've got about 10, 15 minutes left. And we will be talking issues and going through our issues book on the Zoom call that we're doing on Friday. Bill and Shawn, I might ask both of you I know there are quite a few people on today who have not attended the Chippewa Valley Rally. So any advice, you're familiar with how it works with the meetings in legislative offices, any advice for somebody going for the first time?
Yeah, whether you get a lawmaker or a staffer, treat them the same. That staffer might be a lawmaker someday. That staffer plays a significant role in the lawmaker's daily activity. Most lawmakers are generalists, they know their issue area from their prior career, but they can't know everything that well. Staff are much more important in the Capitol than a lot of people give them credit for. So even if you get a staffer, treat it like you are meeting with the decision maker and make your pitch, or start with the thank you for all the good things and say, hey, we got a little bit of a crisis on our hands. We'll be back. But staffers remember that they take note of who treated them well and who didn't treat them well. And sometimes that impacts your ability to work with their boss. So my advice is, treat them well. I had coaches say this to me growing up playing hockey when we'd go to Canada and play. Everybody ties their skates the same way. Don't be intimidated. You actually are much more effective than because you come from their home area, right? Shawn and I are paid lobbyists. They expect us to know your issues on your behalf. You're real people. They don't expect you to go 7 layers deep in the onion on the issues. But you're from their area, which makes you more impactful.
And I would add to that too, just a pet peeve of mine, and I've had some Capital Day clients come down. Oh, I forgot my business cards at home. Bring business cards, throw them in your briefcase. Don't forget your business cards at home. But anyway, the other thing that what Bill said, the respect that you're in their office and stay on message, but tell your stories about back home. I run this business, or I'm in a nonprofit that serves 300 folks that do this or that, or this is very important, or I'm impacted by the decision of the hospital this way. My business will see the following impacts. Talk about back home. Talk about what's happening there. That's a real key piece to this as well, is really leaving kind of a mark with folks that, yes, what you do in Madison is important, but what you do in Madison comes from what we're asking you to do down here as well. Don't be afraid to talk about back home. Then Bill's right. As a former staffer, staff will get the information to their bosses. They always do, because people know what's going on. I mean, the last thing I will say is that on this point is you have these relationships. These folks as lawmakers would love to come to your business and tour it. So why would they not want themselves or their staff to treat you really, really well? Because they want to make sure that that they're listening to you back home, and that you're going to say, you know what, I had a great day today. Appreciate the stories that were told on the bus ride down and the way home. But you know what, I really had a good meeting with Senator Jesse James' office. His staffer is just a great guy, and I'm really looking forward to him coming and touring our business. That's the key that you really want, because those offices will remember that, will take you up on that if you offer a business tour or some sort of thing like that.
So, Scott, I'll go back. I didn't answer Brian's question directly. He asked, and he's 5 layers deep in the onion on the redistricting. He asked why the odd number districts aren't up. That was actually part of the original suit. The plaintiffs wanted all senators to have to run again because they believe they could flip the Senate in one cycle, which I believe is true. The Supreme Court, I would argue, wisely denied that. And the reason they denied it is, I think it was a clear case of disenfranchisement, which would have gone to the U.S. Supreme Court and would have thrown it all out. So I think this Supreme Court is shrewd and savvy and decided we're not touching that hot stove. We're just going to stay with what we can control. And if they had gone that way and forced every senator to run again this cycle, I'm telling you, it would be before the United States Supreme Court now.
Okay, so we have a question in the chat, and I will mention, and right at the beginning, you talked about giving thank yous, and we were pretty excited about our list of issues this year in the middle of January when our 3 chambers all approved them, because it was heavily weighted on thank yous. And then on January 22nd, we got the news about HSHS and Prevea. And so Dave is asking the question, what is the best message we can leave behind to the legislature that what happened here will happen in other communities if something isn't done about it?
Well, it's only a matter of time, right? If your local hospital system's payer mix is 2/3 MA, 1/3 private, it's only a matter of time, unless something's changed.
All right, and then go ahead.
Absolutely agree. No, I'd absolutely agree with that, Scott. I think Dave is spot on. This is an important message. This isn't just Eau Claire and Chippewa Valley whining or, oh, this is a one-off. It's only going to happen up here. This is real, and it's permeated throughout the community. It's brought people together up there, and we need to have a solution. And I know Dave Miner well, back to his days in Superior when he used to give me a hard time when I was in the governor's office. Shawn, we don't drive all the way down here to ask for nothing. So I appreciate, Dave, what you're doing and you leading the charge on this thing, because it's really important. I'm glad you're down here now. You've had your meetings, your briefings. The lawmakers know what's up, and they know why you're coming down here. One of your issues is going to be this. And no one could say, oh, you're surprising us by talking about this. You never mentioned this to us. That's not true. Lawmakers of that area know exactly what's top of mind.
We have I think it's more of a comment, but you may want to add to it. Jennifer Schilling makes the comment that the chamber people, the people coming to the rally, are citizen lobbyists. Lawmakers will see you at a fish fry, parade, and summer festival. What about examples of why these issues are important and valuable, and it's okay not to know all the answers to a staff or legislature, and you can follow up? And by the way, we would refer to her as Senator Schilling because she served in both the Assembly and the Senate, and was a former minority leader, and now is with Mayo Clinic. And
well, we won't hold it against her, Scott. She's a UW lacrosse grad, so we won't hold that against her. But anyway, no, Jennifer is spot on. I'm teasing. I've known Jennifer for 30-some years. She is right. As someone who has sat in a very high position down in the Capitol, her days are busy. Sure, she would have loved to have met with more groups that she could have. I don't dare speak for her, but I think I know her well enough that she would love to met with those groups, but she can't. So her staff would do that. But lawmakers, our ears are low to the ground the way it is. But now with these new maps, folks, with people out there calling around, I always say this to my clients, and I have a lot, as Scott said in my bio, a lot of agriculture clients and a lot of folks that sit on town boards, or they run feed mills, or they run grain dealers, they run farm implements. You are community leaders. You are folks that are respected in the community. You go to work every day with pride, but you also lead organizations. So these lawmakers are going to know where you're at on stuff. And that's why it's important that you connect with them, so you know what they're up to down in Madison. So when they come back home, as Jennifer said, you see them out and about, they're going to know that they should reach out, talk to you. Oh, follow up. I heard you were in our office last week for the Chippewa Valley race. Sorry I couldn't make it. I had 2 hearings that day, but you talked to my staffer, Mitch, about X and Y, and we're working on that. So that's Jennifer's spot on, and thank you for those comments.
Yeah, I don't want to freak anyone out because I don't think you're going to get asked tough questions, but let me give you an easy exit ramp. You can say, let me check with the chamber and get back to you, right? If they ask something that you're not familiar with, just say, I'll check with the chamber and I'll get back to you. That's all you need to do.
Yeah. Scott, I know we're getting towards the end here. I just want to kind of throw a overarching statement at the end here. I think back to where my heart is and where I really enjoyed what we've done with this group is knowing how hard, and I know the Heritage Hall folks have done great work. So, and I don't know enough about the Stout project. And as Bill said, that really came together at the end because you had key lawmakers like Senator Staff Schultz and others that were right there, Clint Moses, that were right there at the right time to strike when the fire was hot. I was so proud of this Phillips Hall project because it took time. And it was one of those things, great lobbying thing. The building was built in the 60s. John F. Kennedy's call for higher service. And then Jake Rassi would say water's through and leaking through the roof. So we had all these tangible examples of what that building was. But it was a place where we had calls, and Bill and I worked hard as lobbyists for you, proud to do that. But we had that constant augmenting from the community say, this is the right thing to do. The Leader Telegram editorials, the business community saying, you guys keep going on this project. The chancellor would keep telling us we had good meetings in the community. The community wants us. Joe Blow, who's an important taxpayer up there, said this is good for our city. It's good for our region. And what's good for the Phillips Science Hall is good for areas outside of the direct Eau Claire city. So this, again, my theme today is this template is here. Other organizations can use you as a model. Scott, they love that scarves. People have stole your idea. Everybody's wearing scarves in this cap now. And so keep wearing those. Be prideful of where you're from. And I'm excited to see you guys next week with the luncheon speaker. I think we got somebody pretty high level with that. I don't want to step on Scott's toes by saying something I shouldn't, but I'm excited to be there. And thank you for letting me serve on your behalf down here.
Bill, any closing comments from your end?
Keep the tradition going. You guys are good at this, and people recognize that in Madison. You do it the right way. You have a plan. You execute that plan. You adjust when necessary, and keep the great tradition going. Like Shawn, I'm proud to help you guys out.
And Shawn, Senator Schilling pointed out that her son is now attending UW Eau Claire.
Well, as I've said to Jennifer for years, we like to call it Harvard on the Chippewa. So I'm glad she does it. So thank you for letting me be part of this, Scott. Thank you.
And I mentioned that having this session kind of grew out of the year that we did the Chippewa Valley Rally completely online, which was 2021. But it turned out that it was valuable to have this pre-meeting to get learn about the political environment and help us be prepared if we're going to spend some time in Madison. The one thing we don't have, though, if we were all together, we could give some applause and thank you. So we'll just do a virtual applause and thank Shawn and Bill for joining us today, and look forward to hopefully seeing them both next week. And a reminder that you should have received an email from me yesterday. It had the link of this one as well as the link for Friday. We will walk through the issues of a book on Friday to help get you prepared. We also are about to send out the list of team leaders and teams, so you can look for an email there to know what legislators you'll be visiting next week and who your team leader is and who you'll be serving with. So all that will be coming. We look forward to joining all of you online again on Friday at 11 and next week in Madison. So thanks everybody for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you.
See ya.